Seems like we have 9, correct?
We have exactly 9. Yep.
Okay.
So the people I don't have are Craig, Aaron, Russell, Brian, Corey, and Brad. So if I said your name and you're here, please say something.
This is Brian. I'm here.
Thank you.
Well, that's Brian Kennedy. There's a Brian Parr, right?
Yeah, Brian Parr is not here. Brian Kennedy is here. But we do have a quorum, so whenever you want to start, Shauna.
Okay. All right, perfect. Let's look. Oh, there's no attendees because sometimes they end up on that other side. Perfect. All right, we better get started. We have a lot to get through. So, all right, thanks everybody for coming. And I just wanted to go over a couple things. We're going to try to move quicker. So I'm going to ask, we have a lot to get through and very few hearings left to do it. So I'm going to ask that we really have some even more concise comments and no Me Too testimony so that we can get through all of this. Hopefully we've done our homework ahead of time, prepared our comments, and are ready to go so that we can get moving. I'm really going to be as strict as I can be on keeping the conversation moving forward. And hopefully not tabling too many items so that we can get through all of this. For those of you who it's your first time attending, we do, well, there are no attendees. There is only committees. So I don't think that there should be any first timers here. There's nobody on record that I see that isn't a committee member. So we won't go over all of that. We'll take a break about halfway through. Anybody have any questions about the process? Since there's no attendees on, I think we should be able to just get going. All right, with that, I wanted to, the first couple items that are on the agenda were items that were tabled from before. And so Erica was nice enough to give us some, I mean, not Erica, Sally was nice enough to, it says we're in practice session. I'm going to start it, I guess. To give us an update on what happened on item number 74 last time. So we had, Tony had presented it, we went through it, had some concerns over some of it. So you can see the notes here on the board or on the screen. Some of the concerns that went by. Then at the end, we
just a second, Shauna.
You can't see your screen.
You can't see my screen? Oh.
No.
Well, we see a screen, but just the
But not
IFC
this
screen.
one. Oh, okay. Let me do a new share.
It's Shauna, we're seeing the IFC code.
Okay.
Code.
All right. I want you to see screen 2. There
Yeah.
you go. How about
And
that?
Shauna, it does look like now we have 10 attendees.
Oh, we have some attendees. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
All right.
Brad got on.
All right. Maybe it's because I didn't hit start the webinar, so they weren't able to come over. All right, welcome everybody. I just want to make sure, maybe Sally, can you look at the attendees and make sure none of them need to be switched over to be committee members? All right, so we're getting started. Item number 74 was carried over from last time. Hopefully you now see on the screen my notes, or the notes that Sally sent in of where we left off. The committee had, it was presented to us. We got all the way through and started making a motion. George made a motion to approve it with modifications. But then as we went through our discussions, even had some more considerations or some more concerns. So in the end, we asked Glenn, who's our subject matter expert for the fire code, to please take the proposal back and write it up with all of these concerns to address these concerns. So it was agreed to table to this meeting. So with that, I have Glenn did such a thing as rewrite it. And I believe this is what Glenn came up with as the rewrite. Does this look familiar, Glenn, as the rewrite?
Yes, thank you, Shauna. And I will do some brief commentary on this. The discussion was about getting that statement for the Denver Department of Public Health and Environment up to a higher level section. And so I did place that in section 307.1. In doing this, Tony and I both recognized this 307.2.1 somewhat addressed the same issue, but in a very model code generic language. And since it was being addressed specifically now in this proposal, we would just eliminate that section from the model code. And then the next section, 307.4, is your current amendment, but that would no longer need to be amended. The only part of that amendment was adding the reference to DPHE. That could be removed now that it's put in the higher level section. And then the final one, 307.4.2, that is showing eliminating the original proposal. So hopefully that explains what these four, all this striking out and underlining is.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right. With that, I'm going to send it out to the public to see if there are any comments or concerns, any testimony in support of this change as modified right here on the screen. Any testimony from the public in support of these modifications? In support, in opposition, any testimony in opposition from the public only? Opposition from the public? Seeing none. Committee, do you have questions of Glenn regarding this proposal? Seeing no questions, committee, since I won't go to rebuttal, there's nothing to rebut. So committee, I would take a motion on this proposal, this modification, so that we can at least have some conversation. Tony?
Motion to approve as modified.
Okay,
Second that.
okay. Who made the motion? Because I thought that.
Greg,
Okay, thank you. All right. Any discussion? Everybody's good with Glenn's revision here on how this was handled? All right, then we're going to move along. Glenn, thank you very much. I would take a vote. All those in favor of proposal number 74 as modified by what you see on the screen right now, please raise your hand. Like 8.
Shauna, I'm
Yes.
having some technical difficulties because I'm
Okay.
connected on. I need
Okay.
to find the. Maybe I'll
So
raise
you
my
want to
hand.
just raise your hand? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Sounds great, Michael. Thank you.
Here
All
it
right.
is.
So 9 in support.
I'm not
All
quite.
right.
Oh, there it is.
I'm sorry.
I'm okay.
Oh, okay. All right. So I have 9. Oh, now I have 10 in support. All right. Now all of those in opposition, please raise your hand. One. 9 to 1. And those abstaining. Anybody abstaining? How many votes do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,
We have
8,
11.
9, 10, 11. So somebody didn't vote. Oh, you know what? We did. Sorry, it was 10 because there were 9 raised hands plus Michael. So a vote of 10 to 1. Thank you. All right, I am going to give you the same spiel I've had to give every other committee. It's great to, everybody's allowed to vote however you want to. However, one comment that has come up, and I was actually guilty of it on my committee at the national level, is if you are voting against the majority, or if you're voting against the main motion, could you please just state a reason why, so that we can have it on the record that at least that concern was brought up, or so that the proponents have something to think about, or maybe we need to modify something in the next cycle. So if you're voting against, at least maybe just a brief reason why. All right, thank you. All right, so that is approved 10-1. Next on the agenda, we also had item number 75 that was brought over. So let me show you those notes for item number 75. It was tabled. This one also on the turning radius, Tony presented it. There was not a lot of testimony no testimony from the public. Then we had some concerns about, can you use it can it be utilized in any other locations? And so it was asked to be tabled and modified and brought back. So it has been. So let me show you the modified version of item number 75.
And similarly, I'll just do a very brief explanation of the modification I made.
I think this is it.
So
Is your modified version, Glenn?
yes, thank you, Shauna.
Okay.
Yeah, and looking at the notes you just showed, perhaps I may have mistaken the notes that I wrote as far as the concern. I understood the concerns to be that this lingering as approved by fire code official needed a little more description and guidance as to what is the reasoning and motivation behind approving something different. And my understanding that was, that it was specific to the pedestrian and bicycle lanes as that portion of this vision initiative. So that's how I wrote it. But clearly the committee's welcome to modify that if it's not in accordance with what their concerns were.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, I will take it to the public. Any public wishing to testify in support of this modified version? Testimony in support of this modification? Testimony in opposition? Any testimony in opposition to this modification? One. John?
Yes, good afternoon. I'm just a little bit concerned about the reduction of a required turning radius dimension where the pedestrian bicycle lanes, the way this is written, our minimum required turning radius is what's basically required for the truck to make the turn. And the way it's written, it makes it sound like the turn radius could be smaller, when I think the intention here is to say that the combination of the road plus the pedestrian and bike lanes would provide adequate turn radius. And so I just think it's a confusing way to have it written. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other testimony from the public? I think real quick, I just want to put up the original proposal. The original proposal is that language without the exception, so that you'll see in Glenn's, when he's crossing this out, he's crossing that out from the original proposal and adding this exception. So that's, just want to make sure that everybody knows how to look at that. All right, let's bring it back to the committee. Any questions of Glenn? We're just kind of in the question phase on any of this. Yes, Tony.
Hey, Glenn, I finally heard back from Public Works, or Dottie, and they're requesting we change the word lanes to facilities, which I guess is more in tune with Vision Zero language. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Jacqueline.
Yeah, I just had a question, and it was about, because I thought like part of the problem with this was the fact that it was just for like Dottie's Vision Zero program and wanting to get pushed into other aspects of development. So I'm just not sure if this establishes that, any developer can come in and use this to reduce or make a combination of bike lanes and, fire access roads for the turning radius. I guess that's what I thought the problem was, that we were just doing this amendment for the Vision Zero program. And that was the concern with some of these amendments, that it would be interpreted by developers in different ways.
Okay.
So
Excellent. That's good. I guess I would just, as a side note, if you are okay, I mean, like if you in general approve of the language here, you could further modify it to put that language in. So if you be thinking about what that language might say, that would be good. Brad?
I
Did you
wanted to
have-
respond real quick to something.
Oh, okay, Glenn. Yeah.
Just that was one part in trying to best understand what was being desired here. I used the term existing fire apparatus roads, understanding that this was more related to modifications to your existing roadways and pathways for pedestrians, and how you would modify those to be more pedestrian friendly while not infringing on the existing turning radius. So I don't know if that helps to clarify the way this was intended to be written with existing fire apparatus roads.
Thank you, Glenn. Any other questions or comments from the committee? All right, I'm going to go to the public real quick. Public, you have a chance to rebut, but only what's been said, and that is mostly about the Dottie stuff, and whatever was just brought up. So, John.
I guess I would just say that I'm not sure I understand the point of it, of saying that the fire code official can reduce the minimum required turning radius. You can simply say pedestrian bike lanes can be established within existing fire apparatus roads, and that would meet the same intent without saying anything about the fact that you're reducing the turn radius requirement.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else from the public wishing to rebut what has been said? All right, I'm going to take it back to the committee. Committee, I would look for a motion so that we could at least have a conversation. Now, your motion could be to approve this as submitted, approve this, I mean, as modified, because this is a modification. You could go back to the original proposal. You could ask for it to be tabled and further modified, or you could say you are approving it with a modification with the intent to further modify. You could ask for disapproval. Disapproval would do away with this modification and take us back to the main proposal. So there are all kinds of things maybe to think about. Robert.
I guess I have a question before I would motion to
Okay.
approve or not. If this section is left as written, my understanding is that the city is constructing new bike or pedestrian lanes within existing roadways, utilizing curbs or barriers, which would truly reduce the size of the road. So in that case, and per John's last comment, you could, from what I understand, the way the city is doing these, you would need a reduction in turning radius to comply with the way the city is building these new bike lanes and pedestrian lanes. And someone correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Thank you. Anybody want to speak to that? Tony?
Yeah, okay, this is Tony with Fire Department. I'll give some background. Robert, and the 2550 provides engineers a little bit of safety margin. The true dimensions of the apparatus are 23 feet and 47 feet. Those are minimums. So essentially what Dottie's doing with their traffic slowing patterns at intersections would impose that fire trucks have to run over rollover curbs to get around those turns, whether they're making left-hand or right-hand turns. And that's where we go back to our engineers and get approval for the specific areas of town. So I think that's why we need each one is handled on a case-by-case basis, depending on response and apparatus that are service those areas of town. So hopefully, Robert, that gives some background for you.
Yeah, it does. How about ones they're building that aren't just curbs, but have a physical barrier there or the parking lane ones they're building.
Yeah, so usually on a straightaway, it hasn't been as impactful where we're, as compared to where we're making right and left-hand turns. So for example, if you go down 15th Street, you know, that went from being a 4-lane road to now reducing traffic to 2 lanes with actual physical barriers, creating separation for the bike lanes.
Thank you. George?
I was just gonna ask if, you know, the intent here is to just establish some ability to have a review by the fire code official. We could honestly just take where the comma is and just change it as approved by the fire code official and leave out anything associated with minimum turning radius or anything else. But recognizing that there's an exception to establish biking lanes within existing access roads, it still has to be approved by the fire code official. That way we're not designing, we're just acknowledging that something has to happen.
Not seeing a comma anywhere.
Under the exception where pedestrian and
Oh,
bicycle
right here.
are established with an existing fire apparatus, access roads, comma, as approved by the fire code official.
Mhm.
So,
I think that's what John was speaking to.
yes.
Brad?
I guess maybe this goes back to Tony as well. I know we don't have a motion on the floor, but I appreciate the discussion. So my question was just, do you want to limit the ability to take an exception to only existing fire apparatus access roads? Don't you want to have, or I would think you might want to have the ability to be able to take the exception on a new fire apparatus access road when the fire code official would deem appropriate. And then my only other comment would be, shouldn't the dimension, the last word in the exception, have an S on the end of it, since we're talking about 2 dimensions, but that's minor.
Okay, thank you. All right. There's been a lot of discussion. I would really like to put this puppy to rest and not table it. So the original proposal said this. You guys had some questions about should it just apply to certain things dealing with Dottie. Glenn felt like maybe he addressed some of that by using the word existing. Maybe existing, it sounds like maybe it doesn't meet it. There's some couple comments to end it right here, just by approved by the code official and stop the rest of the sentence. So I am going to ask for a motion to modify this further, hopefully, or something. I mean, it sounds like you guys want something in there, but it doesn't sound like you're all in agreement on what that is. And so, Glenn.
I could make a suggestion, I think. Again, my presumption was that in a new development, a designer would be able to satisfy both needs of bicycle pedestrian safety and the minimum turning radius. That's why I thought this was more related to a modification in order to satisfy the new pedestrian safety. But nonetheless, I agree that could be left completely out, and perhaps a revised to this would be where approved by the fire code official, comma, pedestrian and bicyclist facilities may be established or shall be permitted to be established within fire apparatus access roads. You can leave out existing, and so again, staff can make that judgment on a case-by-case basis, but I would put the where or when approved by the fire code official first, because that establishes that you first have to get this approved, then these could be established within the access road, and perhaps that would satisfy all the concerns.
Like that? sorry, except for I spelled bicyclist wrong.
Yeah,
but-
or if you felt it was more important to speak specifically to the turning radius area, could say established within the minimum turning radius of
Within.
fire apparatus access roads. That's all just word adjustment you guys can suggest.
Of, or just say of. All right, that's a suggestion. All right, who's next, George?
I was just gonna make a motion to modify the modifications and accept. I didn't say that in
Two,
the right order, but I think you can.
That's
probably
okay.
translate it.
You want to approve as further modified
Yes,
by what Glenn just said on the
I
screen?
want to have that under discussion, but yes.
Okay, all right. As further modified by what's on the screen, and that's subject to further discussion. So is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. All right, so it's been moved and seconded to further modify this proposal as shown on the screen. Let's talk about it. George.
My concern is, do we really need to add the minimum required turning radius element to it? I mean, the whole point of this, from what I'm thinking, just reading, is you want to have the ability for the fire code official to have the tool to establish whether you want to use these pedestrian and bicycle facilities within that radius. That's it. Minimum, maximums, all the other things, I'm not sure. I'm not sure we need to be that specific, but that's why I wanted to be open to discussion.
Do you just want to take out the word minimum and say within the required turning radius dimensions of the fire apparatus road?
I think that meets the intent. The whole intent is to give the fire code official the power to modify.
Okay, thank you, Greg.
Yeah, real quick, the base code, the required turning radius of fire apparatus access road shall be determined by the fire code official. Can't we just use the base code language?
That's a very good point. And you're in. .503. Where did you find that? 5034?
50324.
50324. Required turning radius for fire. There you go. So there's that language versus your guys' language, which is specific to say the size or as approved by the fire code official. Is it that you specifically want those dimensions in there? Michael.
Yeah, I like the way as written by Glenn. I think that from what I remember from the previous meeting, the original intent was to provide a hint to whoever is designing a new building that if there is a bike lane that he could probably request to be reduced. And I think that note identifies that. If the bike line is going to be new, obviously the building is already there. So I like the way it's written by Glenn.
The original exception, or not the one we just modified, but the original?
The one we just modified were approved by the fire code official, etc.
Thank you, Michael. Brad?
Thank you.
Just, I guess, 2 points. I imagine Tony's going to speak to this in a second anyway, but as a former fire protection review engineer, having the dimensions in the code is extremely beneficial because it prevents one phone call every time somebody has to design the roads. And so if they had to contact the fire code official to see what was approved every time a road was laid out, we would be getting a lot more phone calls. And we'd like to treat keep those to a minimum if possible. And I guess my second comment is I think we could, in the modified version that Glenn proposed and you typed up, I think we could get rid of the words "to be established" and not lose anything in the meeting. So. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, anybody else? Anybody else? All right, so I have a motion on the floor for approval as further modified by this language right here. Tony,
One last thought. I like how it's written. Should there be a need to state something about, even though you're allowed to have those facilities, they should not obstruct the turning radius?
If I can address that, Tony, I think we've already got the fire code official approving it. And that's certainly one of the reasons why we're doing it. So keeping things simple and just allowing them an out, which is what this is doing. This is allowing designers to know it's got to be within 25 and 50 feet. They don't have to look or call anybody for that. And they know that if there is some pedestrian or bike facilities, they can address it with a fire code official. I think after that, we're kind of getting in the weeds.
Yeah, good
Right.
point.
all right, anything further before I'm going to call the vote? Motion in a second
just-
for, okay, go ahead. Who is that?
I was
Tony?
just going to add a little information for the committee's awareness. In your current amendments under section 503.2.1 for dimensions, it further speaks about fire apparatus access road widths and about existing fire apparatus access roads. And there's an exception in there that you guys have added that says low profile bikeway elements 4 inches or less in height are permitted in required width, but shall not reduce drive lane to less than 10 feet. So your current amendments do have some language about the drivability of these bicycle segregation devices.
Where was that one?
Up. Next page up. One more page up. And right there. Yeah, at the bottom, exception, low profile bikeway elements. So that seems to be existing language that is speaking to what you guys are talking about, yet this is referencing the width dimension, not the turning radius dimension.
All right. Anybody have anything that they want to add before I call a vote? I know you're reading and looking and there's lots to go over, but we also need to move forward. So where am I at? Where's the proposal? Oh, nope, that's not it. Okay, I am going to call the, is this the one that I just modified? No. Gee whiz, I have too many things open here. This one. All right. This is the modification right now. Any last comments? Because I'm going to call the vote. Doesn't look like it. All right. All those in favor of this proposal number 75 as further modified in by the highlighted section that you see on the screen, where approved by the fire code official, pedestrian and bicycle facilities shall be permitted within the required turning radius dimensions of fire apparatus access roads. All those in favor of that, please raise your hand. It looks like there's 12. And I think that that's all we have because we didn't know that we had any, but all right. Any opposition? I don't think we have more than 12. Any abstentions? No. Woohoo, good job, guys. As modified further. 12-0. All right, I'm gonna save that one. All right. Okay, next on the agenda, item number 39. Item number 39. We haven't talked about this one, so this is a new one. Tony, this looks like your proposal. Do you want to speak to this one? There you go.
Yes. All right, section 50341. So we'd be modifying it again to acknowledge what Dottie is attempting to do, and including speed cushions and traffic circles, and acknowledging that those are acceptable within our routes. So the proposal would read, traffic calming devices shall be prohibited unless approved by the fire code official. Where approved, devices should comply with Denver Department of Transportation Infrastructure's rules and regulations and specifications, including speed cushions and traffic circles.
Thank you very much. To the public for testimony in support of this proposal. Testimony in support? Anybody? Testimony in opposition? Anybody wishing to speak in opposition to this proposal? No? All right. Committee, any questions of Tony? No? How about a motion? George?
Make a motion to accept as written.
Okay,
Second.
okay.
Who seconded? Sorry.
I have a second by Tony. That's who I heard. I don't know.
Thank you.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve as submitted this proposal, number 39. Any discussion? George?
My only discussion is I always love when we add more clarification for the Denver amendments, for giving them pointers to go someplace that gives them the information they need.
Thank you. Anybody else? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor of number 39 as submitted, please raise your hand. I see 11. George, are you able to vote now? I mean, Michael? Yes, you got your hand raised, so I can see it now. All right, sorry. All right, that's 11. All those opposed? Oops, I didn't lower your hands. I thought I did. All right, all those opposed? Sorry. All those abstaining? How come our vote keeps changing? We had 10, then we had 11, then we had 12, now we're back to 11.
We have 12 voting members on.
Yeah. So somebody didn't vote. And I don't know if they've just stepped away from their desk or not, but we need to try to get all of the votes accounted for, please. All right. Anyway, a unanimous vote. So it's not that it's a huge deal, but we definitely want, there's a chat. Okay. All right. So number 39 was as submitted. Let's go to number 46. Is next on the agenda, 46. This is John Alessio. John Alessio. You here to speak to this?
Actually, Shauna, this is Tony. He
Okay.
submitted this on behalf of fire department. He's no longer with us.
Oh, okay.
So I'll present for him.
Okay.
This is an existing amendment for fire pump room locations. And the existing language has been really controversial because it hasn't been clear. So John's intent was to simplify the language and clarify what our intent and wants are. And I can read the whole thing, Shauna. Do you think there's a need, or we let people read it on screen?
I think we should be okay. Everybody should have access to it. I don't see anybody on that is strictly calling in. Everybody is logged in, so I think everybody can read it. Unless somebody wants it to, it's, you know, it's deleting a lot of wording. So if you want him to read it, we can. All right, I'm going to go to the public. Thank you, Tony. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak to proposal 46 as shown on the screen here? In support of proposal 46. No support. Opposition? Anybody wishing to speak in opposition? Okay. We'll go to the committee. And well, there was a hand, but now there's not. Anybody from the committee have any questions of Tony on this proposal? Michael?
Yeah, I do like the modification because actually it did need to be simplified. But even as written, I still have, from the design point of view, there's some questions that probably will come up. One is related to fire pumps in new buildings. So the word new. So some of the buildings might be gut and remodel. So, I mean, you can call them new, although they're existing, but obviously, if you're changing use or say total gut and remodel, probably the fire pump might need to move. So that's number one. Number two, the word directly, a lot of times implies that you need to have a door to the outside, although you are allowed to go down one level if you have a means to, you know, with the exception number one, basically. Then the next word that sometimes is kind of like confusing is under exception 1A, where it says a dedicated stairway. So a lot of times we use a egress stair, and you can call it dedicated, but I'm not quite sure exactly what that means. Dedicated to the fire pump, or so.
Okay.
So I think those are the three main things.
All right,
But
Tony, do you want to respond?
It does clarify. It is a lot better than before, though.
Thank you, Michael. Tony, do you want to address those three questions before we go to the next person?
I think,
So his question was about new buildings versus just buildings, I guess, and about directly and about dedicated.
yes, I think, I think, Mike, we've never, you know, depending how we use the IEBC provisions for complete alterations or change of use situations. I don't think we've ever made anybody move an existing pump based on those provisions. So that'd be my response to the first question. And then the second question, I think, you know, it's always been our intent that that room be located on a perimeter. Hence the word directly. And then the third question, I agree with you. I don't know that the word dedicated down there in exception 1 is necessary.
Excellent, thank you. Michael, does that answer your question?
Yeah, for the most part. The one thing is not. So the word directly implies that we need to have a room on the building perimeter. And it seems to me you kind of get penalized penalized for it because you're allowed to go one level below and travel 25 feet as long as you have a stair. So it seems to me, if you have an egress path of around 25 feet, you should be able, and it's basically part of the stair per se. It could be within level 1, as long as there's a direct path to it and there's no intervening rooms, since you're allowed to go down to the basement.
Thank you. All right, Brian.
My only question was about the last part of exception 1, the terminated within 25 feet of the pump room door. I'm not trying to, I guess I'm just playing devil's advocate that you could have a stairway with a 25 foot long stairway or hallway, and then you could have another hallway without a door leading to your pump room that could be 50 feet inside the building, if that makes sense. I think the intent here is to get the pump close to the outside of the building, and I just don't want to leave some kind of loophole for somebody to get around that.
Okay, thank you. Tony, or did anybody want to respond to that question, Tony?
I think, and Brian, I would agree that I think the intent when the committee placed this amendment was to keep the route the fire crews would use to service the fire pump room protected. So in most cases, if you're going down a stairway, that's a protected shaft. And the pump room would be in proximity to that protected route. And same thing if you're accessing from the ground level right into the room, it's automatic protection.
Thank you, Tony. Wayne.
Yeah, I kind of have a similar thought and concern as Brian mentioned. Would it make sense, Tony, to add or clarify, within 25 feet total travel distance of the pump room door, just to further clarify the point and the intention here? That's all.
Thank you, Wayne.
And that would make sense. I mean, I think since two members have the same opinion, that could help clarify the language.
Terminated within 25 feet total travel distance?
Yeah, I think so. And terminated within 25 feet total travel distance of the pump room door. Yeah, I mean, total travel distance, everyone knows what that means and how we're measuring it. So I think it kind of sets the table as to what that is alluding to.
All right, thank you, George.
And that was the intent, where it says door serving the pump room shall be within 25 feet of the stairwell door. So you're meeting the intent of the whole assembly, door to door is within 25 feet. At least that was what the original language was stating.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, I'm going to take this to the public real quick for rebuttal. Is there anybody from the public that wishes to rebut anything that they've just heard? No new testimony, just rebutting anything that you've just heard. Rebuttal? John? John?
Are you asking me, John?
Yes, yes, oh,
Oh,
sorry.
No, I
There's
don't have
only
my
one
hand.
John in the public, so.
Okay, I don't have my hand raised, so thank you.
Oh, I thought you did, sorry. All right, Kevin. I'm gonna allow him to talk there. Kevin Nagahashi. Butchered up.
Yes, Kevin Nagahashi with Central Phelps. I was wondering about the "and terminated" in the exception 1. If this was meaning that the stairwell would then have to terminate at that one level below grade. If it was an egress stairwell, then you wouldn't be able to send that stairwell down to the lower level, B2 or anything further down. Is that correct?
Tony?
Yeah, that's a good observation, John. I don't think that was the intent.
Or Kevin, that was Kevin.
I'll just add to the committee, stairway by your definition would be from one level to another. So though we may look at a stairway as one scissor stairway going through multiple levels, when you look at the terms in the code, it would be one stairway to that level. And then if there was another stairway to a B2 level, that is now another stairway from level to level.
Kevin, did you have anything else on that?
Okay. No, that was kind of what my question was about.
Okay, thank you very much. I gotta figure out how to lower your hand. Oh, lower all hands. There you go. All right. All right. Anybody else from the public with rebuttal? All right, committee. I'm going to bring it to you for a motion and some discussion. Right now we have it modified, so you could do as submitted as modified, or intent to further modify, or to disapprove. So I'll let you guys come up with something. Brian Kennedy.
I did want to ask, following on with Michael's comment, is there any need to clarify a dedicated stairway, what that means?
To remove the word dedicated? Did you want to remove the word dedicated or just to clarify what it is?
To clarify it, is it a stairwell that's dedicated only for the fire pump room, or is it just a stairway?
Okay. Anybody have their druthers on that, Tony?
Yeah, I don't believe that was the intent, and that's not traditionally what we've seen. So I would say let's get rid of the word dedicated.
Yeah, I might just add there, if you guys look at the original amendment where it speaks to a dedicated stairway is predicated by their, is then speaks to the minimum width. So it sounds like the intent of that term dedicated was that if you haven't established a minimum width of your stairway due to egress requirements, then how would you determine your minimum width? And so this is just filling in that hole, saying if it's a dedicated stairway, now we need to address what the minimum width is. I believe that's why that was probably originally there.
But you believe it's no longer needed the way that it's worded.
Correct.
All right, Brian, you still have your hand up? Kennedy. Michael?
Yeah, so yeah, I would like to, if possible, to remove the word dedicated, but now do we need to clarify that it is some type of an protected egress stairway and not just a stairway that is open to public, or do you think that's sufficient?
Anyone?
I think historically we've seen exit stairways utilized, which by default would have a rating, depending on the number of floors that are interconnected. So it's typically 1 hour or 2 hour rated enclosures.
If we say exit stairway, is that, or stairway implies that it's an exit?
Where are you wanting that? Right here?
Okay. I think, Mike, they still could use a dedicated stairway if they wanted. And if you're only interconnecting those 2 levels, you may not need a rating.
Yeah,
so I think the way it reads would cover both conditions. Now, Shauna, do we need a motion to modify, or can we modify language now?
Yeah, I would take any kind of motion. You could say you want a motion to further modify it by what we've already done, or you want to modify it even further.
Or can we continue to modify?
Yeah, we can continue. So you just say, you want to move to further modify. And then you can keep modifying however you want to. The motion would be great.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to move to further modify.
Okay,
Second.
all right. So there is a motion for as modified with the intent to further modify. Tony, do you want to talk about that modification?
Yeah, and should we clarify that it's not the stairway that terminates? But what's of interest is a stairway door on that level. So should we bring back the original language saying that the stairway door serving that level shall be located not more than 25 feet total travel distance of the pump room door?
The stairway door here. Pump rooms that are located on one level below grade shall be placed such that there are no.
Yeah, go right there.
Right. Yeah, I see that there. I mean, you want to bring that back, or do you want to put it in this exception?
Yeah, I want to put it in the exception. So we would add that after the and. So we'd get rid of terminated within.
Remove this. I got that part.
And then bring back the stairway door serving that level. Shall be located Yep, thank you.
A stairway with a width not less than 36 inches directly accessed from the exterior at grade level, and stairway doors serving that level shall be located within 25 feet total travel distance of the pump room door.
I don't think doors will be plural, should just be stairway.
Yeah,
Door.
yeah, I agree. And the stairway door serving that level? I don't know.
How do you enforce that if you don't have a stair enclosure? If your stair is open?
Well, isn't this referencing a measurement to the exterior door that opens to the stairway? So are you saying if you had an open exterior, open air stairway?
Well, stairway door, I mean, typically I'm going to say everywhere, but most of the places in the code where they talk about a stairway door, they're talking about a door into the enclosure.
Right. And you might have a stairway that is not enclosed on the inside of the building that's going down to the pump room. And you're saying from that door there, but what if there is no door? It's not an enclosed stairway. So the base of the stairs or the.
So Brad, are you saying the first phrase should say a stairway enclosure?
Well, but what if you're, it's like you have two scenarios. And I'm trying to understand, I guess, if we have two scenarios, I'm trying to understand the difference between them. And one scenario would be, okay, so you have a stair enclosure that may or may not be part of the exit system, extends down to the basement, right? And so you need an exterior door that allows you to get into that stair enclosure, then a stair that takes you down to the basement, and then another door that lets you out of the enclosure. Where do you start your measurement? Do you start it at the door in the basement? You start at the door that allowed you to get into the stair enclosure. And then the other scenario is you simply have a stair, an open stair. You walk in from the outside. You might be on some sort of a hallway or landing, and then there's a stair that just goes down to the basement. Where do you start your measurement there? Do you start it from that door? Or do you start at the foot of the stair in the basement? I'm not sure.
Right, can you say at the bottom riser of open stairs or stairway door?
Although Brad, you bring up a good point because our intent is to keep the crews in a safe path, right? So we probably would want some level of protection.
Okay, it's, unless the requirements have changed, we've never, I don't ever remember requiring that stair to be enclosed. If it, a lot of times it is truly a dedicated stair, they're, for whatever reason, they can't locate the pump on the first floor. I guess a lot of times it's a structural issue. So you come in from the outside, and it really is a small dedicated hallway with a small dedicated stair that goes down to the next level. And then the pump is sitting on a slab on grade, So but we've never required that to be enclosed. Well, I can't think of a situation where it had to be enclosed in the ones that I've remember looking at. I don't know. It's a dilemma.
Well, if you just talk about the bottom of the stair, whether it's enclosed or not, being 25 feet, the only difference is if it is enclosed, you got like a 3-foot landing maybe before the door. So you might be off 3 feet, but
Yeah, if you did
just address, don't address the stair door, just address the stair, the bottom of the stairs.
Bottom riser. Yeah, that's a point. Yeah, so you could go 25 feet from the bottom riser and 3 feet of that would
Or the
get you to
landing.
the door. Yeah,
You
the
could just say
landing.
from the landing.
I believe previously someone brought up the concern that someone could game the design of the stair into a very long stair, and that's what brought the travel distance term in, trying to limit the overall travel. That would lead me to believe that you would want to make this measurement from that exterior door, and then perhaps increase the 25 feet to 35 or 37 to make up for your average 11-foot tread depth on, say, a 14 rise stairway. It's going to get you about another 12 feet. And then that would take care of anyone trying to game an unusually long stairway. I believe that was brought up previously.
Michael?
So on that amendment, I have I think it's been there for more than 10 years, and I have interpreted many different ways, just like what Brad said. So originally, I interpret that it is a stair dedicated to the fire pump from the outside. And obviously, if it's just 2 stories, it can be, obviously it is a stair, but it can be an open stair. But then as the years progress, the way I understood it is a stair, like an ingress stair that is enclosed and protected. It goes 1 level below. And as soon as you exit the stair, you got 25 feet to go to the fire pump room with no intervening rooms. So we kind of need to be careful a little bit about it, because somebody can interpret it also as I'm getting inside the lobby has a direct access to the outside, I'm getting to a stair, and then I have another 25 feet to go. So I believe it's basically a stair with a direct access to the outside, the egress stair, basically. You get into the stair. It can be 25, 30 feet, 40 feet. I don't know what the distance is. It's a dedicated stair. As soon as you exit the stair, you get another 25 feet to go maximum, with no intervening rooms. And sometimes that goes through a parking or some sort. It's not a corridor, it's just, but that's the way, right or wrong, that's the way I interpret it as of last week.
Excellent, thank you, Michael. Robert?
When I've seen these in the past in buildings, it's always in a rated enclosure. I've never seen one that would travel through a open parking garage or anything like that to access the fire pump room. So if the intent here is to provide a rated pathway for a firefighter to access the fire pump room, instead of dealing with definitions of stairways or exit paths, could you add either a number 3 or sentence after number 1 to the effect of egress path from exterior stairway to fire pump room to provide same protection level as required for a fire pump room in accordance with section whatever, I think 913.2.1 to address that.
You lost me. So maintain the same fire resistance as
required for the fire pump room.
it's 7 or a 9.
I guess better than that, in case there'd be a difference between what would be required for the stair and the fire pump room. Egress path from the stairway to the fire pump room shall have the minimum fire resistance rating as required for the fire pump room. And
Good spelling. Minimum fire resistance rating as required for the fire pump room. But I guess we don't have to. Doesn't read right, but I get what you're saying.
that's all I have for now.
Okay, thank you, Robert. All right, who else? What are we doing? We're still modifying. But that is, so you're just saying the path from the stairway. Are you wanting to include the stairway? Because that's not including the stairway.
Yeah, I mean, if you're using a stair, the intent would be whatever path the firefighter is traveling from an exterior door to the fire pump room would be provided the minimum rating as required for the fire pump room.
So the egress path from and through the stairway, or from the exterior to the fire pump room.
Yeah,
Brad?
Robert, that's a good addition because that's consistent with the intent of NFPA 20. Which says personnel are required to be sent to the pump room to monitor the operation of the pump during firefighting activities. The best way to protect these people who are being sent to the pump room is to have the pump room directly accessible from the outside or provided with a protected route to floors located above grade or below grade. And that's out of the appendice of NFPA 20.
Maybe that's the wording that you should use.
No, I think at the end you would put as required for the fire pump room, comma, in accordance with section 913.2.1 of the IBC, or of the International Building Code.
When can you see how that is usually written? When we reference back to the building code, I don't know if it's building code, then the section, or section. then
It'd be in accordance with section 913.2.1 of the.
Could you bring that section up? So,
Yes. Of the IBC?
yeah.
I think that section's controlled by the fire code committee, right?
So the fire code has it, but it just references back to the building code.
What did we say, 913?
NFPA 20 speaks to the rating of the access.
Is this what the section you said, 913.2.1?
Yep,
Because that's requiring. Oh, well, I guess there are some exceptions.
So there's
That
a,
requires a 2 hour.
there's a 913.2.1 in the fire code as well.
Mm-hmm. It should be the same.
It doesn't talk about the path to the pump room. It just talks about the pump room itself.
NFPA 20 says that portions of the building needed for access are required to have the same resistance rating as the fire pump room.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's referencing you to NFPA 20. I don't know why we don't take that NFPA 20 language and put it in there instead of trying to create language.
Yeah, I guess I would have to agree. If that's the intent, and I don't know that I'm a little surprised that is the intent. I don't think it was meant to be that way when we initially put that section in there. But if that's the intent going forward, just point to NFPA 20.
Mm-hmm. Brian Kennedy.
Yeah, I was mentioning the NFPA 20 with the equipment access.
Yeah, okay. I see you guys, your hands are still raised, so I didn't know if you had something else. All right. So we could take the wording out of NFPA 20 and put it here. We can reference NFPA 20. We can keep it this way. What's your pleasure? We need to get moving forward. Let me see if we need to bring in the language from NFPA 20, NFPA 13, NFPA. I got every NFPA here but 20. Maybe I do have it, but I would just say I need the actual wording so that whoever's taking minutes can actually do that. Chief DeBear, I don't know how do you say your last name.
No problem. It's DeBar.
All right.
I thought Alessio's intention was to actually make this more clear and to reduce some of this. And now it looks like we're actually making it longer than it was before. So I don't know, Tony, you spoke with him more than I did about this, but is that not his intention? And then to go one step further, I agree with just quoting 20.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've brought up some good points on what the committee's intent was originally, but then also what NFPA 20 points to today is the intent, which is the protected path for fire crews. So I think we've made good changes to it and also clarified the language.
So by saying 913.2.1 of the IBC, that gets you over to that language that will ultimately send you to NFPA 20 anyway, well, as an exception. Either do a 2 hour fire barriers or 2 hour horizontal assemblies or so.
Yeah, and I think our section just captures that we intend the path to be protected equivalently, correct?
Right, egress from the exterior, not from the stair, but from the exterior, right?
Should it say access path? Because it's not really an egress path.
Right.
Do you know what section of NFPA 20?
Yeah, that's stand by. It's in the appendix of
I'm looking at
section 5.2.
I was looking at 414.2.1, 2.12.
414.2 is what I'm looking at also, of the 2022 version.
I've got the 19 version. Shoot.
It basically says that portions of the building needed for access shall have this fire resistant rating not less than the fire resistant rating of the pump room.
3013. Yeah, I got everything. I have to add NFPA 20 to my list. All right, George.
I think possibly we're overthinking this. We're spending a lot of time rewriting it with more words than what was up there in the first place. And what was up there in the first place has been dealt with for the last 15 or more years. I think Michael brought that point up, is that pretty much most of the designers have a supposition of what this means. At least at this point, trying to come up with the wordsmithing with less words or more simplified words or some other direction. We're not changing anything in the code. We're trying to be more clear. I'm not sure if this is the right time to do that. If we were changing code or somehow impacting this as we want something different, I would say let's go. But what I'm hearing is that we're just trying to make this more clear, and we spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to do that.
I guess that I would only just say that the one change that I see being made is that the path is protected, because that's not in the original language that I can read. So you are definitely making a change there by what you're adding, if that's the intent that you want to do. Otherwise, you're right. What the original language was equivalent. Brian? Did you want to say something, Brian Kennedy?
Oh, sorry. I forgot to lower my hand.
That's okay. Michael?
Yeah, I agree with George. So I think the intent is it is allowed to have a fire pump room below grade, and it needs to have a path to it with the door to the outside, and such path needs to be protected. So I don't know, probably we just need to take a little bit more time and kind of like simplify it. And
Okay.
that's my opinion.
Here's the thing. We've spent a lot of time on this one proposal. And so I'm wondering if we are close to getting it, like we're really, really close, or if you guys need to bring this back. I am a little leery of writing so much on the fly. What consequences that we're doing, but if you guys feel like you're close, then we'll move forward. But if not, I'm gonna say this needs to come back. Tony.
Yeah, I think we're really close, and this would really help architects who are laying out the rooms and doing these fire pump room designs, because most of them don't, they're not familiar with NFPA 20 and don't have NFPA 20 available. So I think if we include this language, it's really beneficial to them.
Robert.
Yeah, I'll throw another wrench in this. There's reading into NFPA 20 further, specifically about the access to the fire pump room through other parts of the building. NFPA 20 gives you an out to not require a rating that would contradict what's being required by the IBC, or potentially what we would write here, and whether we would reference the IBC or NFPA 20. So I think it's important to clarify this, but I also think it requires some more thought in how it's written.
Okay.
Yeah, I would add to that real quick, just looking here at NFPA 20, it uses the term fire resistant rated corridor from an enclosed stairway or exterior exit. So there is certainly some different and critical language used in NFPA 20 that's not being used in this current proposal.
And it gives you an out. I guess that's to address Brad's concern. We haven't always had it required to be protected. If there is an out of it, is that something we could consider as well?
So the specific language is where a fire pump is installed in a parking garage or some other portion of a building separated from the rest of the building by a fire rated construction equivalent to the pump room, and the portion of the building containing the fire pump is protected by a sprinkler system that does not rely on the fire pump. The protected access to the pump room shall not be required.
That doesn't make it more simple.
Yeah, pretty confusing.
What section was that,
I think
Robert?
That is section 414.2112.
Thank you.
I think that's probably for a low-rise building that they just put the fire pump just because the pressure is not there.
Now, that could certainly
Is
apply
it?
in a high-rise building also. If you have dry systems for the garage protected before the fire pump.
Right. But so this only, chapter 5 only applies to high-rise buildings. All right, we've got to come to a decision right now. We're either going to table this or we're going to move forward. The motion on the floor right now is as further modified, so I would need a new motion to table, or we need to figure this out.
All motion to table this, and I'm happy to be involved to help rewrite this if we want to continue to push this forward.
Okay.
Second.
All right, so a motion to table it, we're going to need, whenever we table something, we have to have date specific. So do you think this is something that you could tackle right away while it's fresh in your mind and we can bring it forth at the next meeting?
Yes, I would be willing to do that.
Okay, so we're going to put together a working group, which is going to include Robert, Glenn, Tony. Anybody else want to be on that working group? John. Okay. John, how do you say your last name?
Boy cheese, like boy
Okay.
and cheese.
Okay, just like it's spelled. All right, I just don't want to butcher people's names. So, all right, so Robert, Tony, Glenn, and John Wojcicki. Gotcha. We're going to do that and bring it back for the next meeting. Sound good? All right.
Shauna, will you email this version here
Yes,
to us? So we-
absolutely.
As a working version? Thank you.
So, let me just.
I
write
think
that.
one thing that would be helpful real quick, just to be sure everyone's on the same track, is that 25 feet and where your intent is to measure that from, the exterior door or the bottom of the stairs, be it a door or not. That might be something that's critical to get consensus on.
Okay. All right, so you guys have your job set out for you, and Glenn, you're on that working group, so I'll email that version that we were just working on to you, and then you guys can go from there and bring us a real pretty simplified version next time. Yay! All right. All right, look, guys, we've only got through 4. Here we go. What time is it? It's 3:27. Do we need to take a break real quick? Anybody need 5? We need to take a break. We're halfway through our time, but definitely not halfway through our proposal. So let's take 5. Come back in 5 minutes. I'm going to put up my little 5-minute clock here, maybe, and ask you to be prompt. Let's get started right away. And we're going to get through at least 5 more. Let's see. Can we all at least just raise our hands so I can get a vote to make sure that I have a quorum sitting in front of their microphones? Yeah, it looks good. All right, perfect. Thank you guys very much. All right, the next proposal. So for those of you who may not have heard, there was some discussion about changing the format of these meetings to try to get it to move quicker. We will still go to the public for their testimony, but when it comes back to the committee for questions and discussion, then the committee will have a conversation without having to wait to be called on and to do all of that. We'll come to the committee and try to have those conversations without you guys talking over each other. I don't know. How about George? Why don't you explain what you're thinking?
All my intent is this can go a lot faster if we just have the ability to have an open discussion. We can see each other. There's only 10, 12 of us. Everybody knows everybody here, I think, at least pretty well, if not really well. And so it's just a matter of, I think we could facilitate the discussion a lot easier without having to wait for the process, and we can just make a comment after somebody stops verbalizing.
Okay. All right, so if we're all in agreement that we will be professional, still identify yourself, because there is somebody still having to take these notes, and she might not know you all, and the public that's listening in to these recordings or reading the notes may not know you all. So please identify yourself whenever possible, and we will try that for a couple of items to see if we can move quicker.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so I'm going to bring to the table item number 45. This is dealing with roof hatches. I don't see any modifications to this. So roof hatches, this is Brian Lucas, but it looks like a city proposal. Is there somebody here to present this item? It looks like Brian is here, allowed to talk. There you go, Brian. Brian? You're unmuted on our end, but maybe not on yours. There you are. I don't hear you, Brian. No, I mean, I can tell that you're trying to talk, but I just get a little like, I don't know, squeak or something. So, all right, I am going to let Brian, you want to try it one more time, Brian? No, we can tell you're trying to talk because it makes a noise, but it's not anything. So maybe if you want to log out and log back in, I'm going to move to item number 59, and we're going to come back to Brian in a minute, if that's okay with the committee. So we're going to skip item 45 until Brian can log out and log back in and see if that fixes his issues. And we will go to item number 59, just to keep moving. All right, item number 59, this is Tony. Tony, go ahead.
Okay, this is section 50751. And I believe in previous editions, we accidentally deleted or replaced this section. But the base code intends to specify or benchmark the distance from an existing or hydrant to a building. And for some reason, we removed that and we reverted to table B103, which specifies the number of hydrants needed and some hydrant spacing criteria. So my intent is to revert back to the base code, bring that back in, that initial parameter of how far a hydrant needs to be from a building coverage. So my proposal is to bring back the base language.
Well, I love it when that happens. All right, let's go to the public. So is there anyone wishing to speak in support of taking away Denver's amendment and going back to the base code? Any testimony in support? Any testimony in opposition? Opposition to this? Seeing none? All right, committee. Here's your discussion time.
I make a motion to approve as written.
Second.
Okay, so that was a motion by George. I have to get the motions in as submitted by George, and who seconded? David?
Greg did.
No? Oh, Greg, okay. All right, thank you.
Mhm.
All right, and any discussion?
I like things going back to base code. I think that's all.
Agreed.
I agree with George. I support all deletions. No, I'm kidding.
All 600 pages.
I was actually hoping to eliminate 2 pages. So you won't make. I just reformatted it. It didn't make a dent, but it's okay.
All right, thank you. Anybody else? All right, the motion on the floor for item, this is number 59, is for as submitted. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that appears to be, well, Michael's in there twice. Okay, yes, that appears to be unanimous. That was a unanimous 12-0. Well, I didn't see any abstentions or non-voting. All right, perfect. Let's go back and try 45 again with, who did I say? This is Brian Lucas. Brian, are you available to speak to us now? Let's see, I'll allow you to talk and see how that works now.
Hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you now, Brian.
All right, awesome. So this is a 2-part amendment. One, deleting this requirement has been in the fire code amendments for a long time. It was moved over the IBC for a while, and what this amendment is clarifying, we're bringing it back to the fire code amendments, is that the intent of this is if you have a multi-story building that's not a high rise, that the stair that extends to the roof be provided with a roof hatch. The fine details of this is that currently the black and white of the code, there's a section in chapter 7 of the IBC which allows the stair to be capped with fire rated construction and not extend through the structure above to the underside of the roof. Therefore, technically, this section is not enforceable. The intent of this is if you have the stair going to the uppermost story, that you provide a roof hatch, and that's what this rephrasing is encompassing of the stair. So the intent is that it extends through whatever structure is above and not using that capping section of the chapter 7, which allows a fire rated cap on top of your stair and not extend to the underside of the roof. This would require that stair to extend through the roof structure or roof assembly and provide a roof hatch.
Excellent, thank you. All right, anybody from the public wishing to speak in support of this proposal? Anybody wishing to speak in support? Opposition? Anybody wishing to speak in opposition? No? All right, we'll go back to committee. Anybody have questions of Brian or any comments or?
I do have a question. Exception number 1 says pressurized stairway enclosures. And the reason I'm bringing it up is it kind of gives a hint that I guess if we pressurize the stairway, we don't need to do a roof hatch. And the reason I'm saying is that, you know, I can see an architect saying, well, let's go ahead and pressurize the stairway. And once we do that, it kind of like complicates things. So is exception number 1 necessary? Is that something we can possibly remove?
Yeah, this is Brian Lucas. Can I respond to that?
Yes, please.
The reason why that's in there is if you take it out, a roof hatch would be required in a high-rise building. This roof hatch is intended for a low-rise building without pressurized stairways, allowing the fire department to pressurize the stairways via fans that we would carry and vent smoking heat off of the floor using the stair shaft as a chimney in effect, and opening the top roof hatch. And that was the overall intent of this section and why it's here.
Thank you, Brian.
Is the reason you want to separate it from the chapter 10 because chapter 10 really deals with roof access, and you're just looking to have the ability to vent the building with this hatch?
It's twofold. One is that the IBC amendments, when this was written, we're not accepting any new amendments to chapter 10, so we didn't think it would get in there this code cycle. Two, chapter 10 is for the means of egress. This is not a means of egress issue. This is a roof hatch on top of the stair for fire department operations. So technically it would be best lived in chapter 5, although chapter 10 is most read by architects, which is who we want it to capture and make it easy for them. So that's why we're moving it back to chapter 5.
I wonder if there'd be any wisdom in adding a pointer in the chapter 10 section back to this.
I just want to add, there is more to this proposal that is not shown in that part 2. This is going to remain in the IBC so that it could be accessible to both your design professionals as well as your fire professionals. And so it was selected, though, to move it to chapter 12 as the closest appropriate chapter in the IBC to put it in. But the proposal is that it would live identically in both codes.
Interesting.
But it's a part 1 and a part 2. So are they voting on this part, or that goes to IBC? So it might not live in both, right? Part 2 is the IBC, and so it's going to go to the IBC hearing.
Yeah, yes. The overall intent of the proposal and goal of the proposal is for it to be in both. I was just making this committee aware of that.
Gotcha. Thank you. Anybody else?
So Glenn, is there an administrative issue that the IBC portion has to be approved by the IBC committee? Is that even set forth with that, or is this kind of trailing?
We haven't heard it in IBC yet.
Is that to be heard?
Yep.
Okay.
So whatever you guys decide, most like I'm the SME for IBC, not the moderator. So I would take whatever happens here and the discussion and take those notes over to IBC so that they do the same, hopefully.
Michael, what is the real opportunity for somebody to pressurize the stairwell in a low-rise building to avoid a hatch? I mean, I'm just not sure we need to even address it if it's not a real circumstance. And I don't know. You're going to see that, and Brian, you're going to see that more than we are. I am.
I don't know. Somebody would have to really be wanting to game the system to do that.
Okay, that's what I'm thinking too. So I like simple. I'd like to make a motion to accept as written.
And I second it.
All right, so there's a motion on the floor for as submitted in a second. So the motion was by George and the second was by
Craig.
Craig.
And Craig.
All right. Sorry, I have to get that for the record. For as submitted, any further discussion? Sorry, I'm just writing notes. All right. I guess I'm going to go back to the public real quick because the public hasn't had a chance to rebut anything that they've heard. So I ask for a rebuttal only on what you've just heard. John?
The only concern I have is that this section, which wasn't displayed earlier, modifying the IBC, has no reference to the IFC and vice versa. So in some future edition, someone can make a modification to one that doesn't affect the other. Typically, when we do this, we have a bracketed F, in front of a section that's copied from the fire code to the building code. I don't know why we'd have a bracketed B in the building code indicating a copied section of the building code. And so that's my only concern, is that now you've set up, without a cross reference, you've set up a potential for changes in the future that are not mirrored.
I believe that the B is there because they're just gonna be heard by the building instead of fire. If, I mean, I guess, I don't know if it's possible to take out this part 2 and just say that you guys hear both and put, so that you can put the F in front of it. I don't know. But you could easily put a reference to the fire code. So the motion is for as submitted right now. Is there any interest in modifying to put a reference? Or I could make a recommendation to the building code once we get it there to reference back. But do you want to reference there as well?
Are both sections identical?
Languages.
Yes, they're copied and pasted.
My question to you, Shauna, then is this more an administrative element?
Can I fix it administratively to just put a reference in there? Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying? Or
that's
or
my
to have
question.
it be heard? If that is your intent, if you guys are stating that your intent is to add a reference to the IFC or a reference back and forth, we'll make it happen.
I think the reason it's in 2 different codes is you have 2 different sets of people looking at it. I understand John's point about if you change one, how are you smart enough to change the other one? But we are. So I think it's up to somebody else to decide whether that's really something that's needed as far as reference. I'd like to see somebody else weigh in that they need a reference point.
Anybody else feel that
Yeah.
it's a make or break with this? Brian, let me go back to the proponent, please.
Hey, Shauna, can I just add Tony here? Can I just add that I think there's other sections of code that are regurgitated in both, but we don't ever cross-reference. So I don't think it's anything that's been uniformly done within our Denver amendments. Not saying it shouldn't be, but I don't think it currently exists.
Okay, thank you, Brian.
Yeah, I agree with what John Wojcicki said, that it's common that when the mechanical, we see this common that when there's a requirement in the fire code that comes from the mechanical code, we see an F next to it, or vice versa. You can see an F in brackets in the mechanical code. So I would, as far as your committee goes, I don't think this affects your committee's decision. I think this should be in the IBC committee when they hear this to add an F in it. And I think the building code committee should consider that and add an F. I don't believe you are voting on the IBC portion today.
you're
So I think as far as your vote goes, I think you should approve, my opinion would be to approve the IFC one and then add a note later. Or if I'm in that committee, I can recommend that you add an F to it if we can at this point. But I don't think that should sway your decision from passing this currently.
Gotcha. Good point.
Thank you, Brian.
Anybody else? Yeah, you truly are not voting on this part. It's just there for your reference. This is what you're voting on. All right, the motion on the floor is for as submitted. If there's no other discussion, I will call the question. All those in favor of as submitted? Now I have 13. Okay, 13. A vote of 13, and there's no, well, there is other people. All right, let me lower your hands. All those opposed? All those abstaining? Nobody? All right. I don't know how this. All right. So it has been number 45 approved as submitted 13-0. And I will make sure that those points that you brought up get covered in the IBC hearing in a few weeks. Well, whenever that item gets pulled to the floor. Okay, next on the agenda is item 52. We already did item 59. So we're gonna go to 52, Fire Command Center, Rich Tenorio. Who is presenting this one? I don't see anybody. Oh, there's a Rich, allowed to talk, sorry. Rich, go ahead. But you're muted.
Unmute. Okay, can you hear me?
Yep, now we can hear you. Thank
Okay.
you.
So this was intended because of it's part of the second part. It was two rooms. One was a fire command room and the other one was a fire command center. And so we were trying to get specifics on the fire command center based on there was confusion with the fire command room, which is the next proposal.
Oh, I see. So you have two proposals right in a row. One's for the Fire Command Center and one's for Fire Command Room. So this one that we're seeing right now is for the Fire Command Center.
Shauna, could you add an additional .1? It looks like I missed that in the review of this, section 508.1.1. Thank you very much.
Right. All right, any testimony, anybody else wanting to speak on behalf of the public in support? Anybody want to speak in support? Anybody in opposition? Opposition? Committee? Hello, committee.
Rich, I think this just addresses that the base code added F1 and S1 occupancies. I don't see any other change than that. Is that your
Correct.
perspective?
Right? Because we were based on F and S1. There's been some, million square foot F1, S1 buildings around that would probably benefit from having a fire command.
Yeah, a larger fire command. And then Glenn, if you can look at the numbering scheme, because we already have a 508.1, we already have a 508.1.1. I don't think we want to undo some of that in there. So just look at your numbering. But there's nothing in here that's taking anything away. It's just basically aligning to the current base code, which did add those two sections.
Correct. That's correct.
Right.
Hey, George, if the base code added it in, do we need this amendment?
Well, we replace it. That's the problem. So it's there because the Denver amendments replaces it. So we just have to track that.
Got it.
Yeah, and Greg, we do need it because the base code doesn't have 909 smoke control driving a command center like we do in the Denver amendments.
Thanks, Tony.
I just wanted to make sure that the existing 508 1.1 location and access isn't intended to be removed for this.
It isn't overwritten, and that's what I was referring to when I was talking to Glenn.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. I saw that too, Brian.
No, that's my oversight, and we'll get that taken care of in final formatting.
And if this is the right place, getting things along, I'd like to approve as written. Make a motion to approve as written.
Okay, approve as submitted. That's George. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, and that was
Brian.
Glenn. No, not Glenn.
Brian.
Brian. Okay, Brian Kennedy. Sorry. All right, there's a motion and a second for as submitted with some apparent editorial stuff that we'll have to fix, but that's and then I guess I would ask if you guys have any, I need to go back to the public. So I want to hear any kind of discussion that you have before I go to the public real quick. Nothing? All right. Public there's been a little bit of testimony, not a lot. So if you have anything to say about what we've just talked about, now's your time. Anybody wishing to rebut anything they've heard? Nope. Okay, here we go. Committee, it's been moved and seconded for item number 52 to be approved as submitted. Seeing no, well, you're raising your hands. There you go. All in favor. I'm not gonna wait. All right, awesome. That's a count of 13. And that's only people we have present is 13. So that has been approved 13-0. All right, excellent. Let's go to then, that's gonna save that because I have autosave on. All right, so that is item number 50. Now we're gonna go to 52, which is, or I mean 38, excuse me, 38, which is the rooms instead of the centers, right? Fire command room. Oops, let me just take off. Can't see anything because of, oh. All right, here we go again. Well, this one has Tony's name, but whichever one of you wants to present this one.
Yeah, this is Tony here. What's prompted this is items 1 and 2 already appear in the code. We've added item 3, which is a change to chapter 30 of the building code where cabs and lobbies for elevators need to be monitored. So our intent is to put that surveillance equipment in the fire command room in non-high-rise buildings. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's go to the public. Anybody from the public wishing to speak in support of this proposal? Testimony and support? Opposition? John?
Just a minor note that that statement about the high-rise building should be added because currently the third statement says in a building where elevator cabs or lobbies must be monitored. Doesn't really overrule. I know that there's a requirement for the fire command center in the previous section, but this could be taken to require a room as well.
Tony, you want to address that?
So John, you're thinking there'd be confusion as to whether a room or a command center would be required? Because I think the prior section, right, was clear. If you're a high rise, you have to have a fire command center.
Yes, and I would just say that you could clarify by saying a fire command room shall be provided in lieu of a fire command center in the following locations.
Well, there's Russell Holt, but one of the confusions is in low-rise buildings, we don't have fire command centers, but we still have a lot of, well, at 60 feet, we have to have an emergency phone and some other apparatus at times. And then sometimes, with permitting, because of the layout of the building, they ask for a lobby panel. And instead of putting that in, of course, the lobby, a lot of times Denver Fire wants us to put it in the room that they have designated, a room, a fire command. It's not really designated a fire command center because it's not high rise, but into a room as well, where the fire alarm equipment is.
Going back to the public, I have Brian Lucas.
Thank you. I would just recommend adding where the requirement to surveillance equipment is required. Right now, that could be if a owner chooses to install video monitoring in their 2-story building, and I believe this is required by the elevator code when the building exceeds 60 feet. I may be incorrect, but I would say I'd recommend adding where surveillance equipment is required by ASME 17.1, or if there's another section that requires it, because someone puts in surveillance equipment, that's not required by the elevator code or the fire code. I don't think that's the intent here. Thank you.
And are you speaking about like right here?
I would recommend in a building where elevator cabs or lobbies must be monitored by surveillance equipment required by ASMEA 17.1, something like that.
Okay.
The video equipment is required by the fire department over 60 feet. They got to be able to communicate to that elevator. In 2019, A17.1, it is required, and in the IBC, chapter 30. But actually, in those codes, they actually outside monitoring have to be 24/7 in those cabs under that code. But the fire department also has to be anything over 60 feet, be able to communicate through video and text.
Now, Russ, this is Tony. I don't know, is the elevator communication system required by 3001 is no longer dependent on the 60 feet, correct?
I'm gonna have to review that, Tony. I'll pull it up.
All right, well, real quick, I need to go to the public. Mike Stewart.
So to answer your question on that, Tony, is no, there's nothing in 3001 that requires the 60-foot issue. That's only found in the elevator code. And it's for the travel of the elevator. It doesn't make a difference if it's below grade, above grade. If the elevator travels 60 feet, then you have to have this communication system. And the new requirements out of the building code and the elevator code, now it's a text-based communication and it has to be video monitored. That's where that surveillance part comes in. Russ is correct where he says we're required by 17.1, A17.1, but we also mentioned lobbies. So Tony, with the lobbies, that's more of the RAF system that you would have for your area of refuge, right? Because the elevator code in itself is never going to mention anything about communication for elevator lobbies, but only in the elevator cabs.
Thank you. All right, anybody else from the public wishing to speak? All right, committee.
Yeah, I had two questions, and one, Mike, I think you addressed it, and thank you. So essentially, any elevator that travels more than 60 feet is going to have monitoring, and therefore monitoring has to be behind closed doors, which is going to force the architect into a fire command room. And I think you verified that. Is that correct, Mike? Your mic's still open.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you. And the second thing is, because this is also triggered off by emergency voice, schools now are all driven into voice. So does that mean DPS is fully aware that anytime they have a retrofit or anytime they have a new structure that they're going to be dealing with a fire command room? I know we've been doing it on a couple larger middle schools and high schools, Tony, but how has DPS responded to this?
Yeah, no change there, George. I think this provision's been in the code for 2 cycles now.
Okay. Well, I haven't been upgrading for 2 cycles. It's been relatively recent.
Yes, I believe it's been in there since the 16 amendments.
Okay. Well, you know how many we've done, and we've now recently just done 2. So, okay. I just want to make sure that they've had an opportunity to see it.
Anybody else from committee? Somebody's phone is not muted. Anybody else from committee?
Yeah, I have a question on the wording of the room size. Is the intent to require a minimum dimension of 8 feet in two dimensions? Because then if that's the case, that doesn't line up with the 48 square feet.
Scroll up.
This appears to be existing language.
Yeah, that is existing in
There's
your current
nothing
amendments.
that's existing. There's nothing being changed there. That doesn't mean you can't modify it, but
No, it's an 8-foot wall with equipment on it, and make sure that you can back up 6 feet along that wall. It's 48 feet.
So then is the intent that both walls measure a minimum of 8 feet or just the one?
Yeah, I think an 8x6 room, Robert, is the intent.
Okay. Just a little confusing.
Wayne, they decided to just have conversation between the committee. You don't have to raise your hand.
Thank you for that. So I just wanted to make sure. So I'm looking at the previous amendments and I'm trying to because as far as I know, fire command room is not defined, right? So I'm trying to understand. I think the intention here is to make on a building that's not a high rise, that's not explicitly required to have a fire command center per 907 or 909 for the requirement to be less arduous overall, but still maintain the intent of the fire command center. Assuming that's all correct, the amendment alludes to at the end there, the fire command room shall be located in accordance with 508.1.1. 508.1.1 is the fire command center provisions. So are we treating these as synonymous with one another, or should we define the differences?
Yeah, I think that's just referring you to the provisions that tell you where the room should be located, which has 3 items: be on the ground floor.
Well, it tells you where the fire command center should be located.
Yeah, and I think we're just referring that we're using the same location topics or parameters. Does that make sense, Wayne?
So if we refer back to 508.1.1,
it's location and access.
right? So location then is defaulting to the F1, S1 occupancies over 5,000, 100,000 square feet. I'm not seeing.
Yeah, I think we need coordination on the sections.
Well, that's kind of where I'm going with it. It seems like this fire command room as it's defined would not necessarily be the same requirements as the fire command center, if I'm understanding the intention here.
It would for location and access.
For location and access. Okay, access, I agree. Location would just be, hold on, let me look back at the amendment.
Yes, I think they have it up on the screen.
Well, that right now on the screen is your current amendments, right? And then if you want, this is the proposal.
If I may add, I think some of the confusion is the term location being used in 508.2. A fire command room shall be provided in the following locations. That's really not referring to a location within a building, and maybe that's a poor term. It's referring to in the following buildings. So 508.2 is identifying the building designs that would require it, then pointing you to 508.1.1 for locations within said building.
Yeah, Glenn, do you think we should replace locations with scenarios?
I do. I would, or conditions or buildings. You can simply say a fire command room shall be provided in the following buildings. And then we can clean up the use of the term building in each one of those 3 exceptions. But that might help to clarify the differences between this location being used twice.
Yeah, good point.
I mean, honestly, a lot of times you could leave it just with the in the following. And that's really, that's likely just sufficient as is.
That's probably true too. Yeah, there would be less cleanup of having to go remove all those words building because you put it up here. All right, I need to go to the public real quick. There seems to be, Mike, did you have something to say on this?
No, I just didn't know if I needed to raise my hand again to talk.
Yeah, I mean, your hand is raised. That's why I'm asking, do you want to talk?
No, I don't need to. I raised it again to respond to George.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. All right. Anything else? So right now we are back to the committee. You want to have a motion? You want to have further discussion? What do we got going on here, guys? So we can get to another one.
I've got one more question. Wayne, are you satisfied? I mean, you see where that 508.1.1 is just defining the physical location of what they want to do with command rooms. It's just trying to keep it in the same realm.
Yeah, I think I'm following along here. I still think it's confusing, the use of room versus center, and I'm not sure that it provides. If we're trying to specifically identify different criteria for a room than a fire command center, then I think it should be a defined term. But I think I understand where, or the intention of it overall.
Yeah, this couple of code cycles was basically added because it was up to the inspector or up to an engineer. It was basically very subjective to what an enclosure meant for this equipment. And so coming up with the fire command room a few cycles ago, this was a compromise that I thought worked out for everybody, because at least we know what the minimum square footage is and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
With all of that, I make a motion to accept as submitted.
Okay, there's a motion by George for as submitted. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, Tony. All right, some discussion.
Yeah, do we want to go as submitted? Because on for number
Taking off the
3,
locations. I'm sorry, Glenn.
Okay, as submitted with the intent to modify the modification team.
okay,
I overlooked that. Sorry, guys.
That's okay.
no
That's
worries,
okay.
thanks.
You can modify once you say as submitted. You just can't. All right.
Let's take out
So
the word locations.
modified to remove locations.
And in number 3, we want to maintain where required by ASME 17.1, correct?
I put it in parentheses because that was provided by somebody from the public, and it was not provided by the committee. So if you want something to that, I'll take it out of parentheses and make it part of it. It was just.
I think we want that, because if a building owner that doesn't have the requirement to put it in, he shouldn't be subject to having to follow this guideline.
Yeah, I agree.
Thanks, Greg.
Yep.
All right, so I have as modified by removing the word location and by adding where required by ASME 17.1. Anything else? I can't go back to the public because we are in the motion and second phase. We've already, well, did we do rebuttal? All right, this one time, John. This one time, I didn't ask for rebuttal. You're right.
It's
Go for it.
ASME A17.1.
Oh,
You're missing an
yeah.
A.
Thank you very much.
And there's a reference to 508.1.1, which is, there's been an adoption of a previous 508.1.1 that needs to be coordinated here as well. So this 508.1.1 will have to be coordinated with the.
John, you're absolutely right. This was the discussion under the command center when Glenn needed to fix the numbers. So
Yeah.
it applies the same way.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't want to overwrite that section.
Right. We need to coordinate sections, and Glenn's got that down. Perfect. Thank you for that. All right. We have a motion for as modified with those two modifications and the understanding that we're going to correct any section references. Any other discussion? Mr. Holt?
I'd like to call for the question.
Yes, let's do it. All those in favor of as modified as shown on the screen? All right, I show 11. All those opposed? All those abstaining? 1. There we go we went back down to 12 people. All right, so 11 to 0 to 1. All right, so that has passed as modified. Let's go to item number 64. Tony, this is you. And section 510, emergency response.
All right, this is an interesting one. So what's resided in our Denver amendments was language we created back in 2008, prior to the base code having any direction on radio enhancement systems. So what I've done in the last 2 cycles of the base code, they've really improved the language and provisions. So I've modified our section to adopt all the new base provisions and then keep old important language on how we test systems still in the code.
Right. Any testimony from the public in support of this proposal? Testimony in support? Testimony in opposition? Anybody in opposition to this proposal? Committee? $5. Any discussion, any questions, any motion?
I make a motion, we accept.
Who was that?
Russell Holt.
Russell. As submitted, Russell, is there a second?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear. What was
I
that?
make a motion, we accept the proposal as submitted.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, Tony second, thank you. Been moved that item number 64 be approved as submitted. Is there any discussion?
Only question I have, Tony, is the underlying portions, the added portions, essentially what's been in the policy? Because what I'm looking at here, most of these things, especially the system monitoring, we've been applying currently and have been doing that for a few years now. So can you just address whether these underlying portions are already in your policy? This is just getting it codified, or where did the underlying portions come from?
Yeah, most of them are two basic ones that were not. George, is the adoption of NFP 1221 and the UL standard 2524 that now was created to regulate and list equipment. And then the other one was the change in technology and how they're tested. So the delivered audio quality methodology, and that's been placed in the national code. So we're also placing it in our amendments.
Yeah, the bottom half I don't question or concerned about, because you're right, it's the way we've been testing, the way we've been building. I am a little bit concerned about the NFPA listings, because are we limiting manufacturers? Because not all of them, the UL 2524, I don't know that everybody has been listed under that yet.
Yeah, that's a great question, but there currently is 5 manufacturers that have passed testing.
Okay, it's not just one, it's about 2.
Correct. Yeah, for a long time it was just Honeywell.
Yeah,
But now, as of last week, we now have 5 different manufacturers.
Okay. Very good.
Anybody else?
Under the system monitoring, are all those points monitored by the head end that we just pick up points from that? The intent isn't to modify the device as it comes from the factory, is it?
The equipment, Brian, has these built in now because these have been a requirement for UL. And so we have added, essentially, they're reduced to about 2 contacts. They're not 8 contacts. but different manufacturers reduce it to different levels, but they're all there now.
Anybody else?
Hey, Tony, real quick, 510.3.1.2 periodic testing, the sentence that you added, Denver Fire Department shall have the right to enter onto a property at any reasonable time. What type of impact on a new high rise would that be? I mean, is it just the crews, walking around and not being disruptive? What exactly does that look like?
Yeah, no, typically, so the line shop has a dedicated crew that works on these systems. So from time to time, if we put up a certain high rise, we may have to validate other surrounding buildings for continued coverage. So it's usually one or two people. They're always in touch with building management. They wouldn't just walk in there and do the testing.
Okay.
So it's always coordinated.
Okay,
But
great.
there was nothing in the language that was giving us access rights. And we had several building owners question whether we had the right to do such testing.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to make sure it's not something that's overly disruptive.
Yeah, no, I'll always coordinate it, and it's fairly basic, one or
Okay.
two people.
Great,
Greg,
thank you.
Greg, with the technology, the interior stuff should already be at full strength. What a building next door gets built up or how that impacts the antenna much more so than what's in the building. What's in the building is our bidirectional amplifier.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. Thanks, guys.
All right, anybody else before I go to the public? All right, anybody from the public wishing to rebut anything that they've heard? Anybody from the public? All right, committee, the motion in front of you is as submitted. If there's no further discussion, we'll call the question. All those in favor? And now we have 13 again. That motion passes 13-0. Thank you.
I
We'll
get disconnected on the last one. I apologize.
Oh, gotcha. All right, no worries.
Sorry.
No worries. That's okay. All right, so that brings us to proposal number 2. You guys are rocking and rolling. Thank you. I appreciate it. IFC 903291 spray booths. John Weishes, this is your proposal, so let me make sure you are.
Good afternoon, ladies. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. John Weishes representing Denver Fire Department with a modification to section 903291, basically intended to simplify or actually to make the language more code appropriate by striking out some of the language and basically saying where a previously approved booth is replaced with either an approved packaged booth or one constructed in accordance with 2404.3.3 and 2404.4, you would need to have the the sprinkler system. That was the crux of it. So it's basically just modifying the language very slightly. No change in intent.
Excellent, thank you. Anybody else from the public wishing to speak in support of this proposal? Anybody from the public in support? In opposition? Anybody from the opposition committee? I know, it's new. It's a new process, right? You have to talk, you have to make a motion. Anybody from the committee wishing to talk or make a motion on
Make a
proposal
motion
number
that
2?
we accept the proposal as submitted.
All right, and that is Russell and Wayne.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? No discussion? All right, I don't see any, so no rebuttal.
Call for the question.
Yep. All those in favor of as submitted for item number 2, please raise your hand. $13 to 0. Thank you very much. Item number 2 has been approved as submitted, 13 to 0. I will bring up item number 41. Oh, there is a 41. Is that what it says? Huh.
41 is what's on the agenda, car stackers.
Yeah, I don't have 41, so let me grab it real quick. Sorry about that. The control panel is blocking my view of my ability here. Right here. And it is for 903-210. Sorry guys, I thought I had all of them downloaded. 903-210.
Yeah, and Shauna, I can start explaining it. It's Tony
Okay, it's
representing
right
Denver
here.
Fire.
There you go.
Denver Fire. And car stackers have been a recent trending topic that's required a lot of coordination. And so one of the items in the last NFP 13 edition, they included provisions to provide extra hazard density to mitigate the obstructed conditions created by the stackers. So one item that we wanted to clarify and has become an issue is there was a lot of sprinkler designs that were placing sprinklers immediately above the stackers. And in many cases, we were getting vehicles that were taller than the stacker was designed for, that were impinging upon the deflector of the sprinkler. So what we're doing here is dictating to designers to place the sprinklers between the stackers. That way we avoid any obstruction or vehicle height conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. It looks like Chief DeBar, you have something to add? Maybe? No, your hand is up, Chief DeBar, so I didn't know if you had something to add to that. No. All right. Anybody from the public, or no, you do want to talk.
I don't. I apologize. I'm trying to do 2 things at one time.
No worries, me too.
Shauna?
All right. Yeah.
I just want to clarify for the committee and oversight in this proposal, there should be an entry statement. This is a new section being proposed, but there's a fail to catch that entry statement there that would explain that.
All right. This says new, but there's usually you put here.
I did, yes. I just want to make sure the committee knew this is a non-existent in either model code or current amendments, and it's newly proposed.
Thank you very much. All right. Anybody from the public wishing to speak to this in support? In support? In opposition? In opposition? No. Committee?
Make a motion to accept as submitted.
As submitted, that was George. Or
Second.
Brad.
Second.
Lots of seconds. Okay, I got Russell first. Okay, it's been moved and seconded for as submitted of item number 41 as shown on the screen. Any discussion?
You could tell.
Robert?
Makes sense.
Yeah, I have a
Robert.
couple questions. NFPA 13 now has pretty specific guidance on what would be required for some car stackers. It also has guidance on what would be required for locating sprinkler deflectors in relation to the cars and how close those cars would be allowed to be close to the ceiling of the sprinkler heads. So what's trying to be accomplished by this section is it's already in NFPA 13, just needs to be properly reviewed or enforced. But my main question would be, how many levels of cars are you allowing in this section, and what density of the sprinklers at the ceiling are you requiring? Because neither of those are specified. I'd be afraid this could be interpreted to open up what would be allowed for car stackers beyond what NFPA 13 currently allows.
Yeah, so 13's dictated, Robert, the extra hazard density for 2 levels. Anything beyond 2 levels has been performance designed, sometimes including in racks. But generally, this is intended for 2-level stackers, which is what 13's traditionally addressed.
Then at a minimum, this should have language added saying for 2 levels of stackers or something like that, so people don't assume it's allowing NFPA 13 to be required beyond 2 stackers.
And I don't know, Robert, I don't know if that's implied when you go to a performance-based design for anything more than 2 stackers. That your overall design layout and approach would be based on that, right? A performance design.
Yeah, it doesn't really get into basically anything beyond two cars stacked isn't addressed by NFPA 13 at all. It wouldn't specifically say you have to get into a performance-based design, but all the guidance I've seen out there basically points you in that direction. And I think you guys have said that also. Specific to this proposal, and I'll go back to my original point. If these systems are being installed correctly per NFPA 13, this should be a non-issue.
Robert, and what section is it of the 2022 now that has better language?
It's the same language in 2019, but it's an annex section, section A435. And it's where car stackers for 2 levels are addressed as extra hazard group 1.
Yeah, and I think where we've run into
Yes.
problems, Robert, is designers using extended coverage sprinklers being placed right above the stackers, and then having vehicles taller than the stacker was anticipated for, parking on them, and the roofs of the vehicle being right adjacent to the deflector, literally touching the deflector. So we've been concerned with physical damage to the sprinklers if somebody puts in a much taller vehicle, but also the obstruction issue, which there's a provision in NFPA 13 that in some cases, some contractors have tried to use to avoid the topic. So I think providing this gives clear language of what the intent is and would avoid the issues we've experienced in the past.
I guess my other concern with this is for extra hazard, you're limited to basically 10 foot by 10 foot for your sprinkler spacing. So you start to limit, you could push past that potentially in order to hit the spaces between cars. And then you get into a whole NFPA 13 issue. Or you still need sprinklers above the car anyway to meet your spacing requirements.
All right, anybody else want to address this? Anybody from the public want to rebut anything that's been said? John?
Gonna get tired of hearing from me, but
No, it's okay.
can there not be a requirement to have a limiting means of you know, like a bar across to make sure that the car is no taller than would be anticipated? Yeah, similar to what you see when you drive into an underground parking lot and there's lower sprinkler pipes. You'll see a, you know, kind of a thing across the entryway that prevents you from driving in if your car is too tall.
Or
Anybody
like
else from the public?
the storage
ahead.
line on a, you know, in a storage room, do not store above this kind of thing, only a much harder version of it.
Yeah, I mean, the sprinklers have a maximum distance they could be below the ceiling or structural deck. And then you have a clearance of typically 18 inches below what that should be. So if people aren't complying with that, that should be an issue that's addressed on plant submittal or with the car stacker submittal.
I think, yeah, I think if we pass this provision, we avoid that issue altogether.
I don't disagree, but then you get into the problem, like I said, where what happens if the car stacks are too far apart and you can't physically place sprinklers without exceeding the spacing limits of NFPA 13? If the center of your car stackers is 15 feet apart and you're allowed 12 feet or 10 feet between sprinklers, it's impossible to locate sprinklers then and be in compliance with NFPA 13.
Yeah, I think in most cases, the racks are typically 8 feet wide, 7.5 to 8 feet max. And then we have 2 feet on either side, right? For a max of 12 feet between sprinklers. And they jam these things in pretty tight.
Yeah, let me verify if it's 8 or if it's 10 feet or 12 feet. I don't remember.
I think max 12 feet, right, for extra hazard. That's what I'm looking as well.
Yeah, it looks like 12 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, 12 feet.
But this is certainly much less costly or prohibitive as compared to putting physical railing to protect the sprinklers.
All right, do we feel like we're moving in the right direction? Do we need to make an amendment there, Robert?
Yeah, I would propose an amendment where car stackers are installed, sprinklers shall be installed, shall be placed between stackers or deck to ceiling to comply with spacing requirements of NFPA 13. Where for cars stacked two levels vertically or less. Because I think if you're getting in a situation where you're doing a performance-based design for higher stackers, the specifics of the stacker can be addressed then.
So I'm in the Denver code. I don't have this ability to modify this. So where car stackers are installed, could you put it there?
Yeah, I think that would make sense.
Right?
Yep.
Glenn, can you write notes because I don't have the ability to, I'm on the online version. Where car stackers are installed, and then what is your language at 2 stories or?
Let me match it up with NFPA 13. Let me find it here.
And since we're proposing an amendment, is maybe clarify shall comply with the obstruction requirements of NFPA 13?
Yes, I would agree with that too.
With the shall comply with the instead of spacing or just
spacing and obstruction.
Spacing and obstruction. Okay, spacing and obstruction there. And then here, where car stackers are installed.
Where car stackers and car lift systems with 2 cars stacked vertically.
Where car stackers can you write it in the chat what you want?
Yep.
Where 2-level car stackers are installed, that's one way to put it.
Donna, I'm also writing this in my Word document records
Okay.
for this proposal. So what I have
Right.
is
I
where
didn't know.
car stackers and car lift systems with 2 cars stacked vertically are installed, sprinklers shall be placed between stackers at the deck, parenthetical ceiling, and shall comply with spacing and obstruction requirements of NFPA 13. Did I capture that correctly?
Yes, that's correct. I would propose beyond that, since you're addressing car stackers, adding at the end, car stackers and car lift systems with more than 2 cars stacked vertically shall be performance-based designed or something like that, in coordination with Denver Fire.
Right. I'm gonna, Glenn, can you share your screen, because they can't vote on something that they don't see. So
Absolutely.
I'm going to
find a
stop
clean
sharing.
screen to share here of my screens. Okay. Share screen. Let's do which one? This one. Share. I just wrote in all caps that for myself so I could distinguish what I was writing. So if you guys can see that, the only thing I was starting to tail off at this last part of the sentence as I was typing it, I'm not sure if that's exactly what you were saying. Denver Fire policy.
Yeah, according with Denver Fire, what?
Yeah, no policy, Glenn. We don't have a policy.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. I was trying to type, but I didn't quite catch everything at the end
Yeah,
here. So if you want
It's a
to,
performance-based design.
shall be in accordance with.
Which is this 2-star stack vertically shall be performance-based design.
Tony, is that how you guys typically would word things like this?
Yeah.
In the other amendment or other sections, Tony, I think you said as approved by the fire code official or something like that. Like the turning radius amendment earlier today.
Right, but yeah, these designs get a little more complex, so because they're dependent on the hydraulics, sprinkler types. So that they usually have to be engineered.
Right.
As opposed to us trying to help somebody arrive at an acceptable design.
So shall be an engineered performance-based design.
Sure.
All right, so Tony, this is originally y'all's proposal. So I would like to just make sure that you are okay with where it's going.
Sure, yeah, I concur.
Okay, so right now we had it as submitted. Whenever you have a proposal that's as submitted, you can always modify it. So we have modified this proposal. So we can do 2 things. If everybody thinks that they like this proposal, we'll just vote on the as modified. But otherwise, we're going to vote on just the modification and then see how that goes, and then go back to the whole motion as modified or as submitted, depending on how that modification turns out. So if you would like, we can split the vote into just voting on the modification, if you would like. George, I see you shaking your head.
Yeah, let's go ahead with modifications and then do it. I don't know if we have any objections to what it's sitting at, and if Tony likes it.
Yeah, I think the only thing, Shauna, we need to add is the performance design still has to be approved by Denver Fire, correct? Or is approved by the fire code official?
Okay, so it'll be an engineered performance-based design approved by the fire code official.
Perfect.
All right. Any other comments? Let me run real quick to the public. Brian?
Thank you. I would just like the committee to consider not putting in that last sentence. Every section of the fire code could be a performance-based design. That section is not needed. If next code edition NFPA 13 has requirements for a 3-car stacker system, now we're mandating that it be a performance-based design. This is already addressed in NFPA 13 because it's outside the scope and it automatically falls. And this last sentence isn't needed. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public? Anybody else from the public? Committee? Want to address that one point?
I would agree with Brian and propose we get rid of the last sentence.
Well, I think you make a good point, Brian, but do you think this would help, especially a designer that hasn't encountered car stackers prior? They don't really have direction as to what we're looking for. Do you think that would help these designers and save us a bunch of calls and meetings?
They're pretty rare. I mean, in my time here, I've only known of less than 5. So, and NFPA 13 is evolving. I think it's going to be a burden that if this does get addressed someday, yeah, I don't think it's needed here, in my opinion.
Thank you. All right, committee, what do you want to do?
Robert, I overspoke when Tony was speaking, but is most of the instructions in the annex of 13 or is it in the body of 13? You're muted, buddy.
There isn't much on it. NFPA 13 defines that a car stacker with 2 cars would fall under extra hazard. That is the annex section. But then your requirements for spacing sprinklers and obstructions for extra hazard would all fall within the base NFPA 13.
Yeah, but it's pointing through the annex.
Correct.
Okay. One of the main tenets of what we do with the Denver amendments has been to clarify when it's not code yet, an annex is suggested, and make it simpler so that we don't have to deal in field with all the phone calls to the fire code official. If we need this now because there's not enough information to saying we can do it by NFPA 13, yes, they'll improve it in a couple of years and maybe we can remove it in the next cycle, but I'm not sure that anything in here shouldn't be here because it's already in NFPA 13 with enough clarification, which is just my opinion, but that's what we've always based it on. We don't want to add code, but we do if it's not there yet nationally. And Tony, that's your call, buddy. I mean, that's, you know, where you feel that's going to be at.
Yeah, I mean, I think these are becoming more frequent, right? As construction and density and space becomes more premium, we're seeing larger and larger systems that exceed that 2-car stacker situation. So I don't think it hurts us to keep it in there, and I think it helps designers to understand what we're looking for.
Tony, I guess a question for you on this of how you could do this administratively, but would it be possible to have a policy related to how to design car stackers instead of a direct code amendment addressing it? Just because it's evolving so much?
That is a great question, Robert. And right now, San Francisco Fire Department is the only AHJ that has any kind of language directing designers. And we've looked at it. Our process for evolving policies has been slow. And I don't know how soon we'd be able to get one out there.
Okay, I think Portland, Oregon has one too. I'm looking at the San Francisco one now. That being said, since it's evolving so much, why does Denver Fire need to address it in code? And can this just be something that you address on a case by case if it's not being addressed in code in more detail?
Yeah, well, I think that's what the performance-based design does, right? It tells somebody, hey, this isn't This isn't a prescriptive recipe. Come up with a plan and then present it to us. And that's how we've handled all the ones we have. We've probably, I would say there's probably 10 to 15 now that we've processed under a performance-based approach.
All right, we have a motion for as modified with what's on here. With what's on the screen, including the highlighted so far. What I'd like to do is see if there's any other discussion around this proposal as modified, and so that we can get to call the question. If you don't want it and you think it should be policy, then you could then vote it down. But I think we need to probably get this going. We've got 5 minutes. Is there, I'm not gonna, I'll give you one last chance for any discussion, but I'd like to get moving on this.
My last comment on it will be, I just think you're trying to put something in code that's evolving very fast, and you're not fully addressing what's required by code within this. So it's opening a can of worms and not really helping anyone by putting this in there.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, but
Anybody else?
Robert, I don't think we're changing anything we've already been doing. We're just telling people what we're doing.
Anybody
Are
else? Robert?
On plan reviews, are you requiring sprinklers to be put between cars currently?
No, I was talking about the last sentence on the performance-based design.
Okay, and I agree. I think that's how these should be addressed.
Yeah. So no, we're now, if they put sprinklers over the vehicles, we're now asking for clarification on how they're going to manage height of vehicles using the stackers.
And
so as soon as we ask that question, then they modify their design to put sprinklers between stackers and avoid the topic.
Would that be a plan review comment or something you address on the permit review comments?
Correct.
Okay.
All right, anybody else? Seeing no other discussion, I'm going to call the question. The motion is for as modified by what you currently see on the screen. The items in all caps are the most current modifications. All those in favor of as modified, please raise your hand. All right, that's a 10 for as modified. All those opposed? Two. And any abstentions? Let me lower these hands real quick. Oh, my mouse is not cooperating. Any abstention? Greg, was that an against or an abstention? Sorry, okay. Any
I didn't know.
abstentions?
Nope, I voted no.
Opposition?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so that yeah. All right, that motion passes. 41 passes with a vote of 10-3 for as modified. All right. We're going to stop here. I want to remind John, Wojciech, Glenn, Robert, Tony, that you guys are going to bring back item number 46 modified for the next proposal, and we'll start with that one next time and then move on. We got through 10 plus 1 tabled, so pretty much 11 proposals today. Great job, everybody. Thank you very much for that. Any questions? John, did you have a question?
Yes, very quickly. I apologize. The very next submittal, number 6, somehow an old version of that was submitted. So I would like to take the opportunity to provide you with the actual one that had all the information provided in it.
This
for
is
the
the
next
one that
time.
I have.
The very next one, number 6, has.
Yeah, this is the number 6, and this is not the right version?
I can't see your screen, but I assume there's some
Oh,
yellow.
oh.
There's a bunch of
sorry.
yellow highlight on it. It's not the right one.
There's one piece of yellow highlight right here.
John, I'm checking right now to see, because
Yeah,
that's what I
if you
should have been responsible for. So I'm checking now to see for
If you
the,
scroll down. Yeah, see like the reason and substantiation, all that. So this was somehow an earlier version. I have
Okay.
the updated version. I'll provide that to Glenn. That
Okay,
was it.
perfect.
Sorry.
That's excellent. And so that's good that it's not going to be heard today. That way we can get the correct version to the public in time and get it posted for everybody to view. So we'll start with number 46 next time and then go to number 6.
yeah, my apologies, John. I'll look for your email on that and make sure that it gets handled.
Thank you, Glenn.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Great job. We'll see you in, I don't know, a few weeks.
Thanks all.
Thanks,
All
all.
right, thank you.
Thanks, Shauna.
Thank you, guys.